Hello, everybody, and welcome to our case study on this 2008 GMC Yukon. This guy came into us from another shop, and the complaint is it has a rough idle. Actually, doesn't quite feel like a misfire, but as soon as you start it up, within a few seconds, it kind of starts to jerk a little bit, and looks like the check engine light's on, so I'm going to assume that there's some codes in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a picture of the instrument cluster on it. So hopefully you'll be able to see the tachometer jumping around, and then from there we'll head on in and see if we can't check it for codes and that kind of stuff. So let's get started with, let's see what it looks like when we start it up. So here we have the vehicle idling. I do not have my foot on the gas. I do have my foot on the brake. You can kind of see the traction control light flashing there, which is not good. And you can also see the tachometer kind of jumping up and down. That's what it does. It doesn't seem to matter whether it's in gear or not. It just kind of keeps doing it. So I think the next thing we're going to do is scan it for codes. So we didn't scan the PCM for codes. We got the following. We got a mass airflow sensor code, an intake air temperature sensor code. We've got an engine coolant temperature sensor code, a brake switch code, and a throttle closed position performance code. I think next we're going to go over and take a look at the ABS, because we had that flashing traction control light there as well. Now, when we go over and look at the ABS, we see we've got a couple of codes here as well. We've got a last communication with the ECM. That's not good, and it looks like it's a current code. And we have a system disabled, information stored in invalid serial data received. I'm going to assume that that is invalid serial data received from the PCM. So it looks like we've got some issues with the PCM. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scan tool and I'm going to go in and see what the data looks like from the mass airflow meter and the two temperature sensors that we're setting codes. And I think from there, we should be able to make some decisions as to where we want to go next. So what you're looking at here is a screenshot from my scan tool. I just want to point out a couple of things here. Let me get a pen here. All right, so what you're looking at here is RPM, which is flat, not moving around very much. And down here, what you're seeing is the input from the mass airflow meter reading, which is erratic, and it's not really tracking the RPM of the engine. And then down here, you're seeing the load, and the load is jumping from anywhere from 50 on the low side up to about 80% on the high side. And it doesn't correspond with the mass airflow meter signal either. So what we've got here basically is a situation where the input is reasonably stable. There's a little bit of jerkiness there because the engine is definitely surging a little bit or doing the thing, and yet we see the engine load changing drastically and not really in sync with the mass airflow meter. Now, let me get rid of this. And I'm going to get rid of my ink here. So what I did was I kind of overlaid a couple of the graphs. You can see the mass airflow meter reading here in blue down here at the bottom, which is reasonably stable. Same thing with the map sensor in through here. It's reasonably stable, indicating that there's not much of a change in vacuum. But the engine load here really went haywire here for a second, and then everything kind of went goofy after that. So it looks like we have some inputs in here that don't really uh, correspond with what's happening to the engine physically, i.e. the engine isn't moving around that much, and yet the sensor data is showing some dramatic changes here. I suspect that there's something wrong with this computer, but I want to see what the temperature sensors look like and see if we're seeing the same thing over there. So after looking at the mass airflow meter and load readings, pretty obvious that we've got a problem with the input. So the next thing I decided to do was take a look at the temperature sensors, because we do have codes for them as well. And you can see from the engine coolant temperature sensor reading and the intake air temperature sensor reading that the coolant temperature reading, there's some pretty wild swings in it. There's no way the engine is heating up and cooling down that fast. Same thing with the intake air temperature sensor. The engine is basically sitting here idling, so there's no way the temperature is changing as fast as what's being indicated on the scan tool. So I need to get in here now with my scope and just see what's going on with the temperature signals and the mass airflow meter. So this is my recording from the vehicle. So basically the vehicle is sitting here idling. You can see the green trace on top is the map sensor signal. The orange trace on the bottom is the mass airflow meter signal. Mass airflow meter is a frequency-based signal here. I just want to show you, I'm just going to zoom in on this and take a little bit closer look at it, but I just want to point out these little spikes here. These spikes seem to correspond with changes in the engine tone. Now, obviously, these changes are much faster than what the engine can actually change, but I just want to go in here and kind of blow this up a little bit to get a better look at it. Okay. So we can see the mass airflow meter signal down here on the bottom. Where the spikes are, it gets really noisy. This is the noise on the map sensor circuit. Again, this noise, when you look at it over here where it's not there, this is abnormal. This is not caused by anything, any change in the engine. This is something wrong with the mass airflow, or sorry, with the map sensor signal. Same thing down here. We see the same kind of garbage or noise on the mass airflow meter signal. I suspect that this is coming from the PCM. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and take a look at the powers and grounds for the PCM. So here we have the PCM powers and grounds. The blue trace is the PCM ground. The purple trace and the orange trace up at the top are the battery power and switch battery power or switch ignition power into the PCM. We see some of the same noise here that we saw on the mass airflow meter circuit and the map sensor circuit. Again, I believe this is coming from the PCM. One of the things I did notice on this vehicle was key on engine off. The problem with the data still persisted, but I just wanted to show you the powers and grounds here just to let you know that I don't really see anything unusual here. There's no dips, fallouts, that kind of thing. Again, this is just a little bit more evidence that we've probably got a problem with the PCM here. So what I decided to do here was I decided to put my scope on the ECT and the IAT at the same time that I'm watching the scan tool. And what you'll see here, and if you kind of watch the scan tool, which is on your right, you'll see the data physically change on the scan tool screen. And yet we see no change in the signals being produced by the two sensors. So clearly the PCM is displaying inaccurate data. That combined with the PCM's powers and ground check and that kind of stuff, we're going to call this one for a PCM. So here we are after replacing the PCM. You can see that the idle is nice and stable. Looks like it needs an oil change. I'm just going to drop it in gear here briefly. Again, the idle is nice and stable. We don't have that flashing traction control symbol on anymore. And I did do a quick scan for codes after we programmed it and road tested it. There were no codes in it, so looks like a bad PCM was the cause of this one. New PCM fixed it right up, and we are good to go. If you like this video, please let us know by following us or liking us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you want access to more in-depth training videos, please visit our website at www.autoaide.ca. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video.